Memorial Day was yesterday, and I'm still feeling very, very American today. Can't describe it, can't explain it, but here I am. Today's story, though, might just explain why. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today is Tuesday, May 26th, 2026. This is Roll to Disbelieve, and I'm Captain Cassidy. Thank you for joining me. And happy day after Memorial Day to any American listeners. My country might have some glaring bad points. Be the first to say that. It's a bit like democracy itself, isn't it? As the old saying goes, the worst idea ever, except for everything else. Today's story makes me even gladder to be American. It's about an Ivy League professor getting upset about religious illiteracy. And the religion here is just Christianity. That's it. It got my attention because I've long tracked evangelical leaders who fret about biblical illiteracy. And they're both just about the same thing, but this might be the first time I've seen a non-Christian talking about it. And he's not wrong either. For a while now, I've been noticing that young adults seem less and less familiar with Christian mythology. Today we're going to talk about one very odd place that ignorance is showing up. Oh, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I just hope you enjoy today's ride. Before we get going, I want to thank my patrons and supporters. You make the entire theme park possible. Without you, there would be no rides. Thank you so much. If you're not one of them yet, I would love to have your support as well. Please check out the links at the end of today's write-up for ways to become a supporter of Roll to Disbelieve. You can find these write-ups at patreon.com under Roll to Disbelieve, one word, or over at our official website, rolltodisbelieve.com. And now, our situation report. An Ivy League professor is fretting about religious illiteracy. On May 8th, the Washington Post published an editorial from one Gregory Conti. The headline, Ivy League students are suffering from religious illiteracy. And the subtitle, I'm a Princeton professor. Many students know nothing about Christianity. In the Post, Conti writes about his growing frustration with his students' unfamiliarity with both Christianity and biblical mythology. He writes, quote, several years ago, one of my colleagues at Princeton University hosted a lecture on religion and free speech. The talk didn't seem to be landing with the students. Finally, he realized why. The speaker had made repeated reference to the 10 Commandments, and several students didn't know what they were. This isn't an isolated problem. It's increasingly common on college campuses to encounter students who are unfamiliar with the most basic features of Christianity, such as the difference between the Old and New Testaments, or between Catholics and Protestants, unquote. But here, friends, is the interesting bit. This associate professor at Princeton isn't a Christian, and he teaches politics, nothing related to theology. He's frustrated because so much of American politics, especially in the past, draws upon Bible-based imagery and specifically on Christian doctrines and ideas. So his students, in turn, don't really understand the material that he's trying to teach them. For years now, I have tracked Christian leaders lamenting what they call biblical illiteracy among their flocks. But this might be the first time I've seen a non-Christian openly wish that his students had a better understanding of Christianity so they can better understand American politics. But not to put too fine a point on it, it's not just American politics that American students don't understand very well. As we will explore today, there's a wealth of cultural stuff going on in America that many people won't understand either. That ignorance is a reflection of America's ongoing secularization, and it's a trend that Christian leaders seem incapable of changing. To begin, let's set the time machine for 2000. The Tampa Bay Times ran a story that year that I suspect worried their readers. Quote, a Gallup poll shows that the number of people who read the Bible, at least occasionally, has dropped to 59% from 73% in the 1980s. It's the Bible, also known as the Good Book, and it remains unrivaled as the world's all-time bestseller. It is also widely and frequently hailed as the underpinning of America's values system, unquote. Now, because I hold that technical correctness is the best kind of correctness, here's a quick fact check. The Bible is not the #1 bestseller on earth, at least as we measure bestsellers. It's just that it's been around a long time, tons of publishers offer tons of different editions for it, and lots of ministries buy this book in bulk to distribute to other people. And Americans can be especially thankful that our country's values aren't based on the Bible, but rather on Enlightenment ideas, like civil liberties and human rights, which aren't really found in the Bible. By 2017, Lifeway Research, which is run by the very evangelical Southern Baptist Convention, or SBC, they found that fewer than half of Americans in one survey had read more than a few stories in the Bible. Only 11% of respondents claimed that they had read the entire Bible. Another 9% said they had accomplished this Herculean task more than once. Perhaps more worrisome for the evangelicals at Lifeway were the survey's other discoveries. Only 52% of respondents considered the Bible a good source of morals, and only 38% thought it was an actual historical account, and 26% said they thought it was true. But do you remember back when evangelicals weren't fundamentalists and literalists and all that? Roll to Disbelieve remembers. In 2024, Ken Ham, a prominent creationist, he lamented that 11% of Protestant churchgoers could not identify whether a given story in the Bible was from the Old or New Testaments. He's talking about another Lifeway survey. I've got the link in the write-up, and I do recommend you check it out, because one of the mythic stories they suggested was the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus. And only 39% of respondents said that they didn't think that was a Bible story. And it's not. What I thought was really funny was about 25% of the respondents said, "Oh yeah, Bible story, and I could retell it from memory." Ooh, embarrassing. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know that I talk about the Ligonier State of Theology surveys. They're a hardline Calvinist evangelical site, and they've been tracking biblical illiteracy for years now. Their most recent report, the State of Theology 2025, continues to show that even evangelicals increasingly don't buy into hardline Calvinist teachings. And they have written some very spicy editorials and opinion posts on their site about how upset this gets them. However, I've got to bring up the doctrinal yardstick here. Basically, a given Christian always thinks that their doctrines are the correct ones, and they compare everybody else's doctrinal stances against their own. But because there's nothing tangible and objective about any interpretation of the Bible, they all just go off vibes. And speaking of vibes, Randall Rouser, an evangelical himself, accused Ligonier of being biblically illiterate. I love it when they argue like that. Though, when I was Christian, it bothered me a lot. But now we run into an interesting observation about biblical illiteracy, and it ties into that OP from Washington Post that we just mentioned. In 2024, Denison Forum outlined the scope of biblical illiteracy. They're a hard-right evangelical news site, and they were talking about how Americans can't reliably name the 4 Gospels in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They can't name more than a few of Jesus' disciples. I'm not sure even I could. And they can't name even half of the 10 Commandments. But interestingly, the writer at Denison Forum notes that the Bible is a big part of our culture as well. Here's what they wrote, quote, "Without that knowledge," they mean of the Bible's mythology, "you miss the biblical allusions in the speeches of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. and plays of William Shakespeare, and fail to understand the inspiration from Michelangelo's David and Handel's Messiah," unquote. And just like that Ivy League professor, he's right. For Americans, Christian mythology underpins many of our cultural stories. Navigating the political and entertainment scenes without that knowledge must be really rough. And I know exactly how it feels. Back in college, I was probably 19 or so, I tried reading this ginormous allegorical poem called The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. It was written in the 1590s, and it heavily draws on the important people and events going on in England and Europe around the 1580s, 1590s. About 95% of it was totally lost on me. I mean, yeah, I could figure out very easily that Gloriana, the fairy queen of the title, that was Queen Elizabeth. Okay, I got that. But some of the others, total ciphers. And increasingly, secular media has reminded me of that attempt of mine to read Elizabethan court poetry at 19. In fact, I've been thinking about that for a couple of years now. Some time ago, I ran into an analog horror story called The McKinney Family Home Videos. Analog horror videos are usually collections of related videos. The creators try to make their videos look like they came off of a VHS tape. And taken all together, the videos tell a coherent horror story. This particular story details a father's descent into religious madness. He gets involved with a cult, starts murdering young women, and finally, I think he annihilates most of his family. And I was watching an explainer video about it. I don't remember which video it was anymore, just that the guy who created it clearly didn't understand all the religious imagery that was involved in the series. He was very young, clearly not raised Christian, so some of the ideas in the series were just as mysterious and opaque to him as the Fairy Queen had been to me. And when I thought about it, the genre of video this was, analog horror, it's got a lot of allusions to Christianity. Series like the Mandela Catalog prominently involve Christian ideas, like the Archangel Gabriel shows up in that one. Without a decent working knowledge of Christian theology and the mythology, some of the richer ideas in this genre are going to be out of reach. Of course, more is at stake here than understanding a YouTube video series, right? Hell, more's at stake than understanding the allusions made by political figures in their speeches. Knowing about the goofier parts of the Bible and Christian culture helps to protect us against their recruitment attempts. I mean, yeah, of course it does. But it also helps protect us against false Christian claims about America itself. I think it's good for Americans to know that our country wasn't founded as a Christian nation, that it's not based on Christian values, that our rights don't derive from the Bible, and that our civil liberties are secular in nature, and they always were. These truths are actually good for everybody, including, and maybe especially, Christians. As time goes on, fewer and fewer people are going to have the cultural understanding of Christianity to understand past media and speeches. But in turn, I suspect that fewer and fewer media makers and speechwriters are going to include those allusions in their work. In time, those references may strike future readers and watchers like Spenser's references hit me in college. They'll know a reference is being made, but they won't know exactly what it's talking about. And all Christian leaders can do about it is wring their little handsies. Every time that I've ever seen them get upset about biblical illiteracy, all they suggest is pushing Bible reading harder at the flocks. But the flocks never do seem excited about cracking open their mythology book. They're just about as secularized as non-Christians themselves. And if you're wondering if their leaders know it, they do, and they hate it. As for our OP, the secular Ivy League associate professor, I don't think the situation's going to improve for his students. But I wouldn't be surprised if one day colleges start offering an Intro to Christian Mythology kind of class. It would be an interesting development. And when we see the first one, that's when we'll know the decline has well and truly entrenched itself into the American psyche. Either way, America is still America, with or without Christianity. Because its values never actually hinged on Christianity, those values will endure just fine. Hopefully, we'll still be Americans, and there will still be an America, when Christianity finally becomes just an oddity of history, cultural ephemera on par with Elizabethan court gossip. An American can dream, right? Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I am so glad to be back. Next up, Christians still claim that they hold a monopoly on charity and that they always have. But the truth is far less complimentary to their self-image. We'll check that out next time. Until then, this is Captain Cassidy signing off. Hope y'all have a marvelous midweek, and we'll see you soon.